Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I want to show you all the non-fiction books I have on my TBR. So at the end of 2020, I looked through my reading list and I compiled all these charts, and I just to see what I read and how to maybe change my reading habits or what type of books to pick up in 2021. And in my mind, I had the idea that I've read so many non-fiction books in 2020. But when I look at the stats, out of the 90 books I read in total, about only 15 or 16 were non-fiction. And that only happened because on the second part of the year, I was really on this non-fiction reading kick or some sort. So I was really reading, I felt like I was really reading a lot of books, but looking through the whole year, this really wasn't much. And that's such a shame for me because I really love non-fiction books. I love reading memoirs. I love reading history books. And I have so many of books on my TBR which I haven't read. So I thought I'm gonna just show them to you and just maybe think more consciously about them throughout the year and maybe try to read at least half of these in 2021. I don't know. I have about 30 books here, so I want to go through them pretty quickly and just show them quickly. I have them right here next to me, so I'm gonna try to do this as organically as possible, so I minimize all the editing I will have to do later, because yeah, that might take a lot of time if I do a lot of cuts. And the very first selection I have here is 4 books about Islam. It's maybe 4 about Islam is too much. Two I have about the history of Islam, and then I have two memoirs here. And the very first one which started this small collection is this very short pocket book, Islam, a very short introduction by Melis Roetven. And this is an Oxford University Press little handbook. And I just thought that this is going to be a really short and concise way to get familiarized with this subject. But when I started reading it, it just seemed a bit too academic for me. So that's why I picked up The House of Islam, A Global History by Ed Hussein. This one seemed to be a lot more easier to read, to get through, because I'm really not fond of too heavy academic books. Just, I don't know. I think this is going to be much more easier to read. So I don't know if I'm going to read both, but I will definitely read this one. And the 2 memoirs then, and the first one is Infidel by Ayaan Hirsi Ali, in which she writes about growing up in a very strict Muslim family. And it says in the back that she survived civil war, female circumcision, brutal beatings, and she lived in 4 countries under dictatorships. And then she made her way towards Europe and the Netherlands, where she currently lives, I believe. And then the next one, this one I bought last year in 2020, and it is Women or the Future of Islam by Shireen Khan. And in this one, this is a memoir where the author talks about her journey as well, and her founding the first mosque for women in Europe. And I think she also talks about different subjects at the intersection of Islam and maybe feminism. So I think this is also going to be interesting. And now that we're talking about these books, I just also want to show you another one I have out from the library, which is Paradise Beneath Her Feet by Isobel Coleman. I picked this up right before the library closed, so I might have it for quite a while, so I will have a lot of time to read this. But as I read in the back, I think this one looks at different movements within feminism in different countries in the Middle East, and what's being done there in order to further the women's liberation, in order to further the women's movement and the women's rights movement, I guess. And I think this will give an overview over different countries for period of time, and it focuses on some women who are at the forefront of these movements. So it sounds interesting, and I think it ties in pretty well with these other books. And then I have a few books which are memoirs, biographies, autobiographies. And the first one is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, which is kind of like a memoir, coming of age story. Her life while growing up in the South with her grandmother, and then later with her mother, where she was attacked by a man. I believe this is like an American classic and a must-read for everyone. I heard only good things about this, so I can't wait to get to this. I have two books here I bought when I was in Berlin some years ago. And the first one is A Woman in Berlin, written by Anonymous. We don't know who the author is. And this one is a diary of a woman written between the 20th of April and the 22nd of June 1945. And it details the horrors the city and herself went through while it was sacked by the Russian army. Then I have a biography of Eva Braun, living with Hitler, and who this woman is, and how come she ended up being with Hitler for 14 years. And then I have 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup. I've been meaning to read this book ever since the movie came out quite a few years ago now. And I have not read this book, and of course I have not seen the movie because I want to read the book first. So maybe this year is the year I'm going to read this. But basically, Solomon Northup was a free man, and he was captured and sold as a slave. And then this book is about his life, those 12 years he spent as a slave. And then I have A Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. And I guess this is just about his life. And it's quite a big one. I mean, how many pages? Okay, not so many pages actually. I think maybe because the font is quite big, but like 600-ish. That's manageable, but it really looks like a chunky one. Then I have two books about climate change. I have read We Are the Weather by Jonathan Safran Foer in 2020, and I really recommend it if you want to get started on reading a little bit about climate change. I feel that book is not as scary as one of the other ones I'm going to mention here. But I also picked up Eating Animals by him, Jonathan Safran Foer, and the question in the middle is, should we stop? I think it's going to be a hard read, but maybe not as hard as this one. The Uninhabitable Earth, A Story of the Future by David Wallace Wells. Now, I've heard about this book from a few people on BookTube, and everyone says this is kind of one of the hardest ones to read because it's really looking at the consequences of global warming, and I think it's just gonna be so hard to read. I mean, it has chapters like hunger, drowning, wildfire, freshwater drain, dying oceans, unbreathable air, plagues of warming, economic collapse. Basically, everything is going down. Oh gosh, I don't know how, but I have to get to this. I think maybe I'm gonna read it really slowly because otherwise I feel that this might put me in a slump, and yeah, it's not an easy one to read. Another one about the future is Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow by Yuval Noah Harari. I read a few years ago Homo Sapiens, and I really enjoyed it, so I bought this book immediately when it came out. I mean, not immediately, it's a paperback, but I bought it quite soon after it came out in paperback form, and I've been meaning to read it ever since. I really loved Homo Sapiens. I think it was one of the best non-fiction books on the subject I've read, and I was really looking forward to getting into this one. And then I actually have another book by the same author, which is 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And this one also was talked about quite a lot on BookTube when it came out. So yeah, I should get to these soon. Then I have quite a stack here about race, and I acquired most of these throughout 2020. Considering what's happening in the US and what happened throughout the year with the Black Lives Matter movement, what's still happening, and oh my god, what is happening there at the moment. Anyway, I just picked these books up. These were the ones that I heard most mentioned on BookTube. So yeah, I already read a few books about race in 2020, but yeah, these are still on my TBR. And the first one is When They Call You a Terrorist by Patrice Kahn-Kullers and Asha Bandele. And this one is a Black Lives Matter memoir. So yeah. Then I have Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. In this one, he talks about answers questions his son might ask on subject like race and so on and so forth. It's quite a short one, so I will definitely get to this sooner than later. Two other books, White Rage and White Fragility. These really are known right now, and I think I don't need to talk a lot about these, so I'll get to these also at some point. And one which is not focused on the US is Natives, Race and Class in the Ruins of the Empire by Akala. And I think this is focused on the UK. And yeah, I also heard mention this one quite a lot. And then the last stack I have here, and I'm gonna try to go through this pretty fast. But the first one I picked up was Upheaval, How Nations Cope with Crisis and Change by Jared Diamond. And this one drew me in because it looks at different parts of the world, different countries around the world, and how they dealt with a specific crisis. And this just seemed really interesting. So, for example, in Germany, Indonesia, Chile, Japan, Australia, what else? Finland. So it really sounds interesting, and I'm not sure exactly what these crises are, but I'm looking forward to getting to this. I heard about this book and it's such a long time ago, and I've been thinking about it ever since. So when I saw it in a secondhand bookstore, I picked it up. I don't know if it's gonna pick up, it's really wide, but it's Quiet by Susan Cain, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And I'm an introvert myself, so I'm interested to learn more about this. Then I have two books about gender. One is The Brief History of Misogyny, The World's Oldest Prejudice by Jack Holland. So I guess this will look through history and how men kind of ruled the world and women were kind of pushed to the side. Yeah, it says it's an eye-opening journey through centuries, continents, and civilization, and it looks at both historical and contemporary attitudes to women. And the next one is Delusions of Gender, The Real Science Behind Sex Differences by Cordelia Fine. And it says in the front, if you believe that the tide of blue and pink that greets children in a toy or children's clothes shop is just about colors, think again. And then I have Amity and Prosperity, One Family and the Fracturing of America by Eliza Griswold. And I think this looks at the specific family and this woman and how she became an activist, and she fought for her rights and for the community. This is basically fighting against I believe, this great corporation, and how this great corporation and their products leak into the environment and make people sick, and how she fights against that. The next one is Extreme Economies, What Life at the World's Margins Can Teach Us About Our Own Future by Richard Davies. And this one sounds so interesting because it looks at different communities throughout the world where people live kind of, it seems like they live kind of off the grid, maybe outside of normal society and the economic system in those countries. And it really takes places from all over the world: Japan, Europe, South America, North America, Africa. So I think it's going to be an interesting view at these communities, who these people are, how they live, why they live like that. Did they choose it themselves, or this is just because of socioeconomic structures in those specific countries? And then I have three history books. I have SPQR, A History of Ancient Rome by Mary Beard, and I have The Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan. Aren't these, I think these are just beautiful covers. I don't know when I'm gonna get to these because I think these are gonna be quite heavy books, but hopefully they're not written in a very academic way, too much focused on just numbers and facts and figures and dates and so on and so forth. And then the last one I have is The Witches, Salem, 1692, A History by Stacy Schiff. Now, I've been reading books about witches on and off for the past 2 years, and I've never read a non-fiction account, So I think, yeah, this will give me a great introduction into what really happened in Salem in that year. And then we're down to the last ones, and I have a few which are Hungarian here. But before we move on to the Hungarian ones, as a Jane Austen fan, I also have a non-fiction book about Jane Austen, which is Lucy Worsley's Jane Austen at Home. And I previously read some non-fiction about Jane Austen, and I've never read anything about Lucy Worsley before. And I know that also she has quite a few books out on different topics. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. The next one I have is a book about Frida Kahlo. And this one I picked up in Budapest, so it is in Hungarian. And it is Frida Kahlo's, in Spanish, it's called Yerba Santa. And if you translate it to English, it is actually Saint Grass. In Hungarian, if you translate it from Hungarian, it's called her book about grass, which is weird. It's not at all about grass. It's about this is based on her own little diary. She basically had a diary where she wrote recipes and maybe thoughts and so on and so forth. So I think it's gonna be an interesting one to read. And I'm looking into it. It does have some recipes in it as well. But I'm thinking that maybe this is gonna be also some tidbits about her life. And yeah, I've never read anything about her, and I think she was a fascinating woman, so I can't wait to get to this one. And then I have 3 more books in Hungarian, and the first one here I'm not sure I will ever read, because I just looked into it and it looks quite the heavy read. But it is Sigmund Freud's book about dreams, and of course this is in Hungarian as well. And yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe later in life, I don't know. But this edition, this cover is just everything. It's really, really beautiful. It's like a naked hardback. And then speaking of Freud, I bought 2 other books at the airport when I was on my way back to Copenhagen. And these are also in Hungarian. And the first one is like, what would Nietzsche do? And then what would Freud do? And it's just like this picture book where it's really interesting, where I think it discusses different topics. It answers questions one would ask with answers Nietzsche and Freud would give. Interesting concept. And I don't know if this is a series and there are more out, but if I read this and I will like them, then I will definitely check these out. And I'm not sure if these came out in English. Well, actually, maybe they did, because they were written. This one is written by Sarah Tomley, and this one is written by Marcus Weeks. So there you go. Very random, these 2. But when I saw them at the airport, I always check out the bookstore in Budapest at the airport on my way back. When I saw them, I was like, I have to pick these up. And if I read them, I think I might also give them away to my cousins. I don't know. So these are all the non-fiction books I have on my TBR. I think, as I mentioned in the beginning, I think they're all over the place. There are so many different ones. And I will definitely start maybe with the ones on race, sprinkle them out throughout the year, and the memoirs. I don't know about those heavy history books, the one about Rome and the Silk Roads. I don't know, maybe I should also slow down my reading and try to give myself more time to read these books, because I think some of them will be quite heavy. But anyway, let me know if you also have non-fiction books on your TBR which are dying to get to this year. And if you have any other recommendations based on the ones I have here, please let me know in the comments below, because whenever I go to the bookstore, I always check out the non-fiction section, and it seems like I'm most likely to buy the books I found there as opposed to fiction titles. I don't know why, but I guess this is where I leave you today. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.